Hey there, John Moore here, and I am a shamanic teacher. That is, I teach shamanism and I practice shamanism, and I live in Maine in the United States. And today I'm going to talk to you about shamanism and schizophrenia, and I'm going to talk a little bit about psychosis and what that is. More specifically, I'm not going to deal or less specifically, I'm not going to deal specifically with schizophrenia, but with psychosis. And schizophrenia um, is a disorder, I guess, for lack of a better term, that includes symptoms of psychosis. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about how it relates to shamanism. And I'm going to have to use a little bit of a circuitous path. So one of the things that happens when some people start to train when most people start to train in shamanism, first, we're journeying, we're getting visuals that aren't coming from our senses. All of these things are happening, and we may wonder, am I making all of this up? Is it a hallucination? Is that? And that is a perfectly natural thing to wonder. And I have a video on my channel about shamanism and the use of imagination, or of the faculty of imagination. Essentially, we're making everything up. Even the stuff that's coming in through our senses is being translated in our consciousness into the subjective experience that we're having. You are not hearing my voice. You are hearing, waves coming out of a speaker somewhere that are airwaves that are hitting your, hitting your tympanic membrane in your ear and causing the bones to vibrate, which causes an electrical signal to go to your brain, and then your brain, or your consciousness, I'm not equating the brain with consciousness exactly, but your brain translates that into language, and your consciousness experiences that. You experience me talking to you. You experience seeing me. And yes, we're using sense organs. Technically, a hallucination is sensory information that is not coming in through the senses. So if I imagine a small dog sitting on my table, I guess that would be a hallucination, even though I know that I'm maybe hallucinating that, or I may be imagining that. And some hallucinations are stronger than others. I might argue that we're hallucinating all the time, because what we think is objective reality is actually quite subjective. But that is another video for another time. So I'll say this to begin with, that I am not a medical doctor or psychiatrist or a psychologist, or have training in mental health care help. So I'm only going to speak from that aspect as a layperson. I do have a tremendous amount of training in shamanism, and have done quite a lot of research, and know people who have done scientific research and continue to do scientific research, and I read the scientific articles. I'm a very scientifically minded spiritual teacher. And I think I am not one of these people that thinks science disproves spirit, or spirit disproves science. I actually think the two can be married together rather beautifully. It's just that thinking gets in the way. Habits of thought, which are beliefs, get in the way of us marrying those things together. So, when I'm talking about shamanism in this circumstance, I'm talking about people who do journeying through rhythm or dancing. And shamanic journeying is the main practice of shamanism, when a shaman goes into an altered state of consciousness, leaves their body, travels in what we call non-ordinary reality, travels in other realms, has experiences, and works with helping spirits, usually to provide healing or information, but also for personal development, personal revelation, that sort of thing. So I'm not going to deal specifically with shamanic cultures that use plant medicine, although I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And by plant medicine, I mean plants and fungi like mushrooms or and I guess cacti are plants as well, but plants and mushrooms. When we talk about plant medicine, it's a broad term that shamanic cultures use to describe the various natural substances that they might use to induce an altered state of consciousness. And all of these are hallucinogens: fly agaric mushrooms, psilocybin, peyote, DMT, ayahuasca, which, DMT is from ayahuasca. And there is not a whole lot of research on these because most of these are Schedule 1 drugs in the United States, and in other places they're illegal. They're just starting to do research now, in the US anyway, on the fantastic mental health effects that can come from things like psilocybin or MDMA. MDMA is not really hallucinogenic, but these psychedelic assisted therapies, and I strongly encourage that, and I encourage that from a scientific perspective, because I think when you're putting things in your body, you should understand the risks. They may be very low risk. Psilocybin is many times less dangerous by all measures than something like alcohol, for example, but it's illegal, and it's also unnecessary for shamanic journeying. But the reason I mention that is there's a very recent article that came out in the past couple of weeks, and I'll link to it in the description. I'll link to it in the description down below. And it's very scientific. There's a lot of math in there. There's a lot of statistics in there, but it was basically a very large study of the brain states of shamanic practitioners, people who were using drumming, specifically in this test. And I think it was 500 or more people that they tested. They hooked them up to sensing machines, EEGs, and checked out what was happening in their brains. And what they saw was that there was a complete similarity in their brains, not complete, but huge similarity in their brains to what people were doing when they were taking psilocybin, magic mushrooms. To those of you who don't know what psilocybin is, magic mushrooms, very similar, however distinct. There are some distinctions that are probably really important. So shamanic drumming can drive a state of consciousness that allows one to reach a brain state that's very similar to if you took psilocybin. The nice thing about using drumming or rhythm or singing or dancing or what have you, if you have a bad trip of some kind, or you need to be clear-minded instantly for some reason, you can stop. And that's different than any of these drugs. Once you've bought the ticket, you're on the ride, so to speak. You're going for that ride. So some of these chemicals last a very long time. I'm not sure. I think psilocybin lasts for hours. DMT, when people smoke it, might last for I think I've heard 20 to 30 minutes. I've never taken these, so I don't have experience with it, but I'm just from reading. And ayahuasca, I think, is several hours as well. So if you're having a really bad experience from it, you can't stop. There is no antidote, and there's nothing that can prevent that from happening. You just have to ride it out. Not to mention the fact that ayahuasca doesn't sound real pleasant to me, in that it causes you to have diarrhea and vomiting, sometimes violently. So anyway, and they can be, most of these work on serotonin system, and there can be some dangers there. Although I think psilocybin has proven out to be much less dangerous than ayahuasca for sure. So anyway, talking about shamanism, talking about drugs. Why am I talking about that when I'm supposed to be talking about shamanism and schizophrenia, or shamanism and psychosis? So schizophrenia is, meets specific diagnostic criteria as a diagnosis in the DSM, where they can say you have this, you have that, you have this, you have that. And part of that is this psychosis, which is this losing touch with reality that is sometimes accompanied by hallucinations. And how similar is that to what we as shamans are doing on purpose? And how are they sort of related? So I'll take this from kind of two different perspectives. And I'll just say instead of schizophrenia, I'll just say psychotic disorders, because some people have psychosis and are not schizophrenic. There's such a thing, for example, as depressive psychosis. So people who are in significant depressive episodes can have psychosis. They can lose touch with reality. They can have disorganized ideas and fears of persecution and hallucinate and all of these things, and that can come in a depressive episode. So, psychosis related diseases. I've read some of the research on these, and there are theories about why these. We don't specifically know with 100% certainty what causes these disorders, such as schizophrenia. However, there's some thought about changes in the structure of the brain, but also serotonin is implicated, and where serotonin and these hallucinogenic drugs is also implicated. We know they work on serotonin receptors. There may be some similarities between these, and by extension, if there's similarity between what people who have schizophrenia are experiencing and people on psilocybin are experiencing, there may also be some similarities to what's happening in shamanic journey. And again, with a journey, if I'm doing a journey for somebody or for myself, I have the choice to stop that at any time. And that is a big difference between somebody who has schizophrenia. They can't choose to stop having those hallucinations. There are medications that might help, but there's not that sense of, okay, I can just stop this. So that is a big subjective difference between shamanic journey. My theory on this, because if I was not convinced that the information I'm getting when I am in shamanic journey is real on some level, and real is a hard word philosophically. Real, what is real and what is not real? As I said, we're hallucinating most of the time. We don't have a real objective view of reality. In fact, our view of reality is completely subjective. So, however, in journey, when I journey and I work with my helping spirits, I have received information that I could not have gotten through my senses or from any other means. I have, from my helping spirits, provided that information to others who were able to confirm it later, sometimes months later, all kinds of things. So I wouldn't do this if I weren't convinced that there's a reality to it. And yes, we call it non-ordinary reality when we're journeying, and it is very dreamlike. But it has no, it is effective. We can affect healing through there. We can affect change in our environments. We can affect change in ourselves. It's very effective. So what I think is happening with a lot of people who are experiencing psychosis of some sort, just this break from reality, I think a lot of this is about them being wide open on a psychic level, which there's an overlap between your brain and your consciousness and your astral body and your etheric body and your spirit body, and all of these parts of you, there's overlap, and they interact to help create the experience that we have. I think people who are going through psychosis, and I've had, and I'll tell you about an experience in a moment, but I've had a lot of strange experiences with people who are having psychosis going on, where they're getting information from places that they don't have access to. The difference is there's no control over it. It's like there's a winter storm outside, and you throw all your doors wide open and you can't close them. And so the wind and the snow and the rain are just going to blow in no matter how hard you try to stop them. Right? So this information is coming in that is not from the sense organs, and where it hasn't been something that somebody's trained to do on purpose, as we do in shamanism, that can become really overwhelming, and the consciousness can interpret that as, can become frightened of that, and that's sometimes interpreted in delusions of persecution, delusional ideas about persecution. Now, in schizophrenia, I know there are a lot more symptoms, disorganized thought, all kinds of stuff, and I do think that a lot of this comes from not, information that's not coming from our normal senses flooding the person, and just the floodgates are open, and it's hard. It's hard. If you think about, if you've never had psychosis, but if you think about times where you've been completely overwhelmed, whether at work or home or both or school or whatever, and it just gets to a point where it's hard for you to think, it's hard for you to organize your thoughts, and maybe you're tired, and maybe you're stressed, and all of those things are happening to you. That is probably some very tiny sense of what's happening here. So there are cultures that take somebody who is going through psychosis and that train them to be essentially shamanic people, to be oracles, or to use that. And there's extensive training in meditation or journeying or what have you. This isn't to say that we can quote unquote cure everybody through these means, but it is saying that perhaps Western psychiatric medicine could look to some of these other cultures and what they're doing and how they're treating people who have these, what they're calling disorders, but these conditions. We could look at that, and we might be able to learn some things from there to help people live better lives, to be fuller, to be more active, to be happier. All of these things that we want for everybody, no matter what. All of these things that everybody deserves, no matter what. But we have a long history of not so great things, like locking people up and doing horrible things to people who had psychiatric issues in the West. There's a story about the oracle for the Dalai Lama. Was a young man who was hallucinating, and I don't know if he's still around today. This was many years ago, but it was a young man who was having hallucinations, and probably he would probably be diagnosed with schizophrenia or something similar to that if he were to see a psychiatrist in the West today. And his parents took him instead, because of the culture, took him to see monks, and the monks trained him extensively. He moved in with the monks and trained him to meditate, to control his mind, to have control over that. And he became the oracle for the Dalai Lama, meaning he was able to use this thing that he didn't have control over, that was causing him so much distress before, to actually have some control over that and use that as a tool. And I'm not going to imply that that's the path for everybody, and that everybody who, people should not do their meds, or people should, I'm not going to say people should do anything. I'm just saying it would be nice if Western medicine, which I fully believe in, would have a look at some of what these other cultures are doing and have found, and how they have worked with people to have better and to have better lives. Now, I don't, I'm the type of practitioner that if somebody comes to me and they say, I'm experiencing depression and I want a healing session, or I've got this and I want a healing session, I always tell people, you might feel incredibly good after a healing session. Don't go off your meds. Don't stop seeing your doctor. Don't, stop any therapy or treatment without talking to your medical professional first, right? You don't go off your meds before because in many cases that would be dangerous. So I believe there could be a really nice crossover between Western modern allopathic medicine and shamanic culture. There's a lot of wisdom there, and as a scientifically minded spiritual teacher, I love to see that. I love to see people embracing multiple modalities and finding out what works for everybody. I also think everybody's an individual, and there aren't cookie cutter approaches that work for everybody either. I'm not out there saying everybody should practice shamanism. In fact, quite the opposite. I definitely will tell people that shamanism is not a path for everybody. It is a hard path. It is not all love and light and rainbows and unicorns and glitter. It's nothing like that. So anyway, that is just a brief talk on shamanism, how it relates to schizophrenia and other sort of psychotic disorders. It's my take on it as a practitioner, as somebody who has worked with people who and talk to many people who are both in the healing professions, but also people are on the other side of that and coming to me for help, or coming, through another practitioner to me for help. So that's my take on it, that these things are not disparate states of consciousness necessarily. I hope that's helpful. I hope you're staying happy and healthy. Please subscribe to my channel, and I've got a lot more stuff coming and a lot of videos on my channel, and I will talk to you real soon.